Hi guys and welcome back, and today we get on with painting the pimped Panther and doing a little bit of weathering prior to getting it in position on the diorama base. So this is the buddy build I'm doing with Steve Mottram, the Panther buddy build, and just wanted to call out to Steve, congratulations on the third place for your tank at the model show that you and some of the boys went to a week or two ago. So well done mate, you've left me in your dust. So everything's pretty much the same as doing the out-of-the-box one. Did the priming, put the wheels on sticks, all that sort of stuff. Although, you will notice I got a closer match to the rust-proof priming than I did for the out-of-the-box one, so a little bit happier with that. Now, I wasn't deliriously happy with the rust work that I'd done on the out-of-the-box version, and I've had in mind for a little while trying something slightly different. So a little bit like the salt weathering technique where you put the salt down and then paint over it and then scrape it away. So I've used some real rust powder, so rust scraped off some, a metal fire pit cover that we've got in the backyard, and then just used some white glue to secure that and spread it out in a powder. And the thought is that I'll spray over this with the different layers of camouflage paint and then come back later and take the paint off, and hopefully that should leave a nice little rust effect. And strange things modelers do. I've spent a lot of time looking at rust on vehicles and looking for old vehicles in particular. And it is a three-dimensional thing. We tend to paint it on, but it bubbles up underneath the paint, and it is, I think, pretty hard to replicate in scale, but this is my experimental attempt to see if I can do that. And here, just doing exactly the same thing with the metal tracks, a fairly diluted mixture of white glue and water painted across the surface, and then just sprinkling the rust powder on, and later on coming back and rubbing that off, leaving it in low spots, creating a few shiny spots. Not too fussed about the tracks at this stage because it's going to be in a really muddy scene, so upon reflection, most of this stuff won't be visible anyway, but it's always good to practice and see what works and what doesn't work. So it's a process that I'd need to refine, and there's a little bit of cleanup needed, and that would be the case anyway. But cleaning out a few of the holes, a toothbrush proved to be probably the best tool to get things under control. And then a very light sand with a sanding stick, which brought up the shiny metal on the raised surfaces, which I quite liked. So I think it's got merit, maybe more so for the tracks than for the body of the vehicle, but we'll have a look at that later on when I finish the painting, which is what we're about to look at next. So I went with the painting and used the silly putty as I did for the out-of-the-box version to do the masking, but I probably put a little bit more thought into it, especially for the upper hull and the turret and what that would look like, and hopefully that worked a little bit better, and I didn't have any of the touch-up that I needed to do as I did with the out-of-the-box one. So here's a little bit of a sneak peek at some of the rust work which I did on the wheel. So same methodology, a little bit of the real rust powder on the wheel and then scraped away after the paint. Not bad, not bad. So technique needs to be worked on, but I think it's got potential. I have to say that the Frill metal tracks were an absolute treat to work with, and despite my severe lack of coordination, this should have been an easy task to get the tracks on, and in the hands of someone more competent would have been, but ultimately got there, and yeah, pretty easy. And you just, if you've not had the metal tracks on the tank before, it's hard to describe, but just the joy of feeling the weight of the vehicle with the metal tracks on, it's hard to explain, but it just feels far more substantial. So I decided this time to paint the upper hull, lower hull and turret all in the one go, whereas in the out-of-the-box one I did it in the three separate parts, mainly because I had to affix the front fenders, which was sort of like the last gluing task that I had to do. Followed exactly the same process as last time, although I was a little bit more mindful of where I was putting the silly putty and thought more about where the next layer would go. So once the green was down, what sort of coverage did I want on that, and how much did I want to then open up for the brown to be the final colour. So I think that worked a bit better. Not 100% happy with it, but certainly happier than I was with the out-of-the-box one. At least there was no touch-up required. So once I'd taken all the silly putty off and was just confronted with the tricolour camo, it was also then time to take the paint off the rust. So I tried a few different techniques, a sanding stick, a little sandpaper, just tried to scratch it off. Ultimately ended up using the Dremel with a little sanding burr, and that seemed to work the best. And again, some lessons learnt, not necessarily perfect. I think there's an inconsistency with the volume of rust powder I was putting on and then taking off. Also really difficult to take off things that are stuck on with super glue because they start to come apart, and it all started to unravel around me. So yeah, I think there's a right and wrong sequence to do this in, and that needs a little bit more work down the track. Having said all that, still pretty happy with how it came out, and I think it's encouragement for me to continue experimenting with how this might get developed into a better final appearance. So onto the sort of bits and bobs and cleaning up, and the painting of the tools is the first place I'll start. And look, I had a couple of comments about, flattering comments about the wood, and I'm by no means an expert, so I spend a little bit more time going through what I do, and there's not a lot of science to it. I use the AK Interactive Old and Weathered Wood paint set. As you watch this, you'll see the order which I put them on. I'd like to say that I always have the same sequence, but that's not necessarily so, and I do sometimes mix it up just for the sake of getting some different variations. But anyway, have a look at this. It's reasonably self-explanatory. And the only other thing I really did with the large block was to get the sharp pointy end of my X-Acto and put a few scratches in it after I'd done a couple of layers of paint, just to give it a little bit of additional grain texture. And that sort of worked unintentionally better than I'd hoped, because it lifted a little bit of the earlier layers of paint and then they resettled, and it sort of gave it a bit more dimension, I think, if the close-ups do it any justice, and that makes sense. So yeah, pretty happy with the way that turned out. And then it was just touching up all the other bits and bobs, bit of metal here, a little bit of rust here and there, nothing you haven't seen before, so not going to dwell on all of that. Now, I was a little bit more careful with the decals this time around, having learnt from experience in cutting out the individual numbers for the out-of-the-box tank. There was some silvering because of the backing film, so I made sure to take all that off. I cut right to the edges of all of the numbers, and that worked really, really well. And again, same old, splashed a little bit of the microsol and the microset around, and I always get them mixed up in the order, so who knows what way I put them on. And the decals went on a treat, settled down nicely, very happy with the whole thing. And technically at this stage, the only weathering I'm doing is the same as I did for out of the box, so that's the very diluted black wash, and once that's on, then a equally diluted brown wash, and I think for both of them I use the same German black brown, the Vallejo paints, just to take some of the brightness out of the camo more than anything else. And so that's pretty much it, guys. We'll just take a few laps around on the magic spinning wheel so you can have a good old look at it, and then maybe a few still photos after that, focusing in on some of the highlights, if there are any highlights, but perhaps details might be a better word. And then I might also just whack it on the Dio base next to the out-of-the-box one and give you a bit of a sneak peek of what that's starting to look like, even perhaps with the half-painted crew figures in there as well. And that is it. So, as always, guys, thanks very much for watching. I appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully you enjoyed the Pimped Panther painting program. Try and say that fast after a few scotches. Next up will be pretty much the second to last video. So that'll be getting them both on the base, doing the mud and the snow and the wet effects and all that sort of stuff. So that shouldn't be that far away, and then come back and do the traditional last video of all, which will be the final reveal. So again, thanks so much for watching. Like if you liked, sub if you're not already sub, so you can keep current with all the new videos as they come out. And as you all know, look forward to your comments, and we'll respond to them all. So take care, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers, guys. Click on the link to check out Steve's channel. Remember, he's an award-winning modeler.